Well, this is Catherine Schneider from the Fitchburg Historical Society, and we're continuing our series of interviews with leaders in the community about how the community of Fitchburg has been impacted by COVID. And today we are so fortunate to have as our guests two social workers from the Fitchburg Senior Center, and they are Sarah Folkers, who is social worker, as I said, and then Amy Jordan. So thank you both so much for being our guests today. And we really are intending to find out, how COVID has impacted from your perspective at the senior center, a lot of the people who are older in the city of Fitchburg. So maybe starting out, just asking if you could tell us a bit about the purpose of the Fitchburg Senior Center and then the services that it provides.
Oh, sure, sure. Thanks for having us so much. We're so happy to be here.
We love to talk about the senior center, so we're glad to have another opportunity. The purpose of the senior center is to, there are many purposes, but really to enhance independence and well-being of older adults in Fitchburg. We're open Monday through Friday from 8 to 4, and we have a variety of programs and activities happening throughout the day. Mainly, we do serve lunch at noon every day. We have a variety of exercise classes. We have art classes, and this fall, a couple of pie making classes, cards and knitting and quilting and bingo and just
a men's group.
A women's group. A ukulele group. We have the Fitchburg Singers, who are a singing group, and they go around the community and perform. It really, I could probably list 100 more things. I just can't think of them right now, but there are so many things going on here, and really we're more like a community center where people can just come and have a cup of coffee in the morning, read the paper. We've got a pretty good group of folks who come every morning and have coffee and read the paper and just sit and chat. Have gotten to know each other. They would never have known each other unless they were coming here.
Mm-hmm.
So we really have a sense of family and community here at the senior center. The other piece is what Amy and I do, is going out into the community and making sure that older adults can stay in their own homes and live independently, safely. We get referrals from a whole bunch of different places: doctors' offices, families, other city departments, hospitals, that type of thing. And we just do whatever we can to put in services in people's homes and connect them to resources so they can stay independent and living at home.
You have wonderful services that you provide, and I had experienced that in my own family with my mother, and thanks to Amy and some of the great resources that were available to her. So you do such good work there. Well, we've had COVID now in our community since about March of 2020, so it's going on about 20 months now. Could you take us through maybe the various stages you've experienced in dealing with the pandemic at the senior center, maybe from the beginning until today?
Yeah, it took me a while to kind of lay it all out, to go back and think where we started in the beginning of the pandemic and where we are now. So I think back in March of 2020, it was shock. The feeling of one day everybody's here and then the next day they're not. How are we going to serve our most frail adults if they aren't coming in? How are we going to give people the services they need if we aren't able to see them? How are we going to deliver food? So that was the initial shock, just complete shock. Probably a week went by and we went into a phase of mobilization. Because we are a staff of only 6, we had to determine who of our 500 volunteers would assist with the meals and getting them out to people. There were only a handful, and I say only a handful, that would help deliver meals, and even less that would help in the kitchen, especially without the vaccine. And because it was so new, people were leery of coming in and helping because we weren't sure how it was transmitted. We weren't wearing masks then. It was just, everybody out for themselves, and everybody wanted to take care of themselves. So we were really struggling. And also, with the shortages in stores, we were also trying to figure out who had what and what people needed to survive, especially the most vulnerable. So that really entailed both Sarah and I. We still made home visits. It was either door to door, not necessarily face to face, but a lot of phone calls, getting people to donate essential supplies like the toilet paper, the Kleenex, thermometers, medication if people needed that. It was really a critical time. We came up with a critical needs assessment that we put online, and people actually access that in the community. They could access that and let us know if people needed help with getting groceries, if they needed help with getting to the doctor, or just, loneliness too. So that was the second stage, mobilization. And then throughout, last fall and the upcoming months, we just kind of found a new rhythm. We were splitting our time between the office and at home. We still hadn't had the vaccine yet. We were still seeing some of our most vulnerable clients, all wearing masks now, delivering meals, still doing a lot of work over the phone and attempting to reach people through the web via Zoom and other internet platforms. But as you know, with older adults, not everybody's savvy with the computer or had that capability. So that was also another challenge, getting people connected in a way they hadn't before and were comfortable with. A lot of our classes, went online. We did drive-by events where people could come say hi. We offered food, ice cream, donuts. We dressed in costumes. It was a lot of fun. And people who had not been out of their homes felt it was an important thing that we were doing because they had become so isolated. And then in September of 2020, we opened our doors briefly for our most vulnerable to come in and have a meal. When I say most vulnerable, it was maybe 5 to 7 people at the most that would come in. We were all spaced out, but boy, were they happy about coming back here and seeing us. And then the virus spiked again and we were closed once more. So all those people that were excited to come in were now told you have to stay home.
And we were excited to have them come in as well because
it was so quiet.
It was just us 6 staff people, and we enjoy each other's company. We're like a family, but it was nice to see some new faces for a few weeks.
So we've kind of maintained this new rhythm since then. People have gotten used to doing things online. We opened up our doors in June and people came in by the dozen. They were happy to be back. They were happy that we were open, and it hasn't kept them away. Most people were able to get the vaccine and feel comfortable now. We've had some new volunteers, so we're just kind of in this new rhythm now.
Mm-hmm. So you felt that thank you for taking us through that, all those different stages that you've lived through at the Senior Center. And the vaccine made a great deal of difference then in people's ability to transition into maybe more safely feeling they could go to the site of the Senior Center.
Absolutely.
So thank you. And there's so many ways. I was going to ask you how you've adapted your program model in order to safely connect with those you serve, but you really answered that question very well. Can you talk a little bit about the role of the volunteers at the center and maybe how that's been affected by COVID specifically?
Sure. Like I mentioned earlier, we have a large group of volunteers, 500 plus, and a lot of them are retired. So the impact was huge for us. We really rely on volunteers to help us with meals and with other programs here, like putting together our newsletters, helping people to get to their doctor's appointments safely. So I think it was determined that if we did not have our volunteers, we would need 3 more staff people.
I think it's even more than that, isn't it?
It could be. I think that's on the low end, but we would need that many people to take care of all the work that our volunteers do. So it's just been hard. We've had some people that have come back after the vaccine, and some people have chose to stay away because they're still unsure, and they're in a vulnerable age group as well. But we've also acquired some new people, some younger people that said, hey, I'm willing to volunteer. I'd like to get out there and help. And that's really helped. So
And
it's
really
impacted us.
Sorry.
Go
didn't mean
ahead.
to interrupt. Amy mentioned younger volunteers. During the beginning, we did gain a handful of younger volunteers that hadn't volunteered in the past. A few high school students that were virtually learning, and so they had a lot of extra time on their hands. And one high school student in particular was here for the first few months. I think she was here every day, Monday through Friday, helping in the kitchen. And she continued until she had to go back to in-person school. But we've had, a handful of younger folks that, really had a lot of time on their hands and wanted to volunteer. And that was a really great addition to the group.
Right.
It's wonderful to hear that there were some opportunities that might not have existed had there not been students with more time available, or perhaps people just looking at life a little differently and a little slower. So, new things opening up in some respects.
Right.
I think a very important aspect of all of this with COVID was, to just look at the impact, and you are certainly in a position to see that well, the impact that the pandemic has had on older residents in Fitchburg. Could you speak to that a little bit of what you've seen?
Sure. I think some of our frailer clients have suffered both mentally and physically due to isolation. It's caused people to become lonely, which has a cascade of effects both physically and mentally. So we saw people with increased suicidal thoughts, as well as depression that might not have been otherwise seen before. Some clients who were coming in every day for exercise experienced a loss in their mobility, then requiring adaptive equipment to get around, like walkers or canes. There were some people that, whether or not this was related to COVID, but were pretty oriented prior to COVID, then all of a sudden were found to have dementia. So we saw an increase in all of those things, but I think the isolation was pretty big for people.
Absolutely. And I've been telling people recently, we're busier now than we were pre-COVID. And that's, I'm not a scientist, but it's likely largely due to the fact that people declined significantly during COVID and didn't need much help, if any, prior to the pandemic, but now are needing more help. And so that's really increased our work and made it much busier here.
Right.
But it's a good thing.
I'm not a researcher, but I think there's a direct correlation between isolation and your ability to maintain some level of independence at home, because I think being part of a community, being part of a family, having that direct contact with people makes a difference in your ability to live well.
And perhaps that is a reinforcement to the two of you of the importance of the work that you do, and to try to cut down on that isolation and the socialization opportunities that are provided through the senior center. So thank you for your insight into that, what's going on with people and the impact that isolation has. We've heard about it with a lot with children, and they're not being able to go to school during the months when the schools were closed. And now to hear, how the senior folks have been impacted by it too.
Mhm.
Um, so maybe to just turn to each of you personally
Mhm.
and to see what the pandemic has been like for each one of you, and then maybe what has encouraged you and
Mhm.
what have been the greatest challenges for each one of you.
Sure. Well, personally, it was a great challenge to try to connect with people in a way that we hadn't before, via phone and the computer with people who didn't have access to those things. I mean, going out into the city where you weren't sure if you were going to be affected by COVID as well. So when we opened our doors in June while others remained closed, it just made me realize that our services were even more essential as we were able to provide that missing link to people when others were still not face to face. And that's still a challenge now, where other organizations where people need, like Social Security and maybe the ADRC, aren't seeing people face to face where we are. We're creating that link for people to get the services that they need. And and on a personal level, I still had one child at home. He's a senior in high school, and that was challenging enough just with one. So I can't imagine having grade school kids, but it just all of it made me realize that I'm in the exact spot that I needed to be, helping vulnerable people.
Mm, mm. Thank you, Amy.
Yeah.
And how about you, Sarah?
And I think Amy would agree. The biggest thing I can say is that the pandemic was like a year and a half long roller coaster, and in many ways it's still happening. But I mean, I remember back to March. It was Friday, March 13th, 2020, and we're hearing about the possibility of having to shut down, and that was really scary, not only for work and our clients here, but personally, because you're running around thinking we have to go stock up on groceries, and when am I going to see my family, my relatives again. So it was scary, and the adjustment to having to live in a bubble was not always easy. Certainly, we had our work bubble here, and that was helpful. It was really like a relief to me to be able to still come to work. Even though nobody was here except for us staff, it was wonderful to have somewhere to go rather than just having to be hunkered down at home 24/7. And I had at the time 2 kids in high school, and I mean that was, I'm sure, a lot easier than little kids, but it was challenging enough because they're doing high school in on the computer laying in bed, and that's really doesn't help with motivation for teenagers. um, so I think it was wonderful to be able to still support our people as best we could in new ways that we're still continuing to this day. And so I think a benefit of the pandemic has, you have a different, maybe a better outlook on life in general, but you're also learning how to do things in different ways that you wouldn't have really known how to do before the pandemic. Um, and Amy kind of said this too, but the whole pandemic really has made me realize, and all of us here realize, that we truly are an essential city of Fitchburg service. Um, I don't want to think about how our folks would have been affected if we had completely shut down and couldn't have done anything. It would be a very different picture right now.
Thank you both for those personal perspectives.
Mhm.
And then I wanted to ask you as a final question,
Mhm.
is there a message you'd like to give to the seniors as we are in this period of Thanksgiving in 2021?
Sure. I think we've come a long way since the beginning of the pandemic. And I think with each month, there is a new hope. And I think if you're feeling alone and looking for community, you can always find it here. We're always here to help, to provide that for people. All it takes is a phone call.
Thank you. And Sarah, any particular message from you?
I would just say ditto what Amy said. I think the biggest thing that it was really exciting in June to see people coming back and feeling great about being able to see their friends again and see us again. And we just love to have new people coming in and joining however they want to join. So, especially this holiday season, I think it's important for people to gather with folks who they're comfortable with and family, whether it's relatives or friends. That's what we are here. And we really enjoy growing our family by having new people come in.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Amy. You have been some of the frontline workers and heroes who have helped us through this pandemic in the city of Fitchburg. So a huge thank you to you this Thanksgiving, our gratitude to you. And your creativity and your response to the community and your welcome and your open doors are just such an asset to Fitchburg. So kudos to both of you.
Thanks. Thanks so much.
You are so welcome. Thank you. And I'd like to just mention also that our interview will be on the Fitchburg Historical Society website, which we love to have people go to and find out more about the history of Fitchburg, which is fitchburghistory.org. So thank you for your attention and for the wonderful work that's done at the Fitchburg Senior Center.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, you too.
Bye.